The Cold War was a geopolitical conflict between the United States and its allies, and the Soviet Union and its allies, that lasted from the end of World War II in 1945 until the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991. It was called a Cold War because the two sides never engaged in direct military action against each other, but instead relied on political, economic, and military pressure, propaganda, and proxy wars to assert their influence. The origins of the Cold War can be traced back to the aftermath of World War II, when the Soviet Union and the Western Allies found themselves as the two dominant world powers. The Soviet Union was determined to expand its sphere of influence in Eastern Europe, while the Western Allies, led by the United States, sought to contain Soviet expansion and promote democracy and capitalism. The first phase of the Cold War, often referred to as the Early Cold War, lasted from the end of World War II until the late 1950s. During this time, the two sides engaged in a series of political and military confrontations, including the Berlin Blockade and the Korean War. The second phase of the Cold War, known as the Détente period, lasted from the late 1950s to the late 1970s. During this time, tensions between the two sides relaxed, and there was a limited improvement in relations between the two superpowers. This period was marked by arms control agreements, such as the Limited Test Ban Treaty and the Strategic Arms Limitation Talks, as well as increased cultural and economic exchange. The third phase of the Cold War, known as the Reagan-Gorbachev era, lasted from the early 1980s until the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991. During this time, the two sides engaged in a renewed arms race, marked by the deployment of intermediate-range missiles in Europe and the development of new weapons systems. At the same time, Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev launched a series of reforms aimed at modernizing the Soviet economy and political system, known as Perestroika and Glasnost. The end of the Cold War was marked by the collapse of the Soviet Union and the end of communist rule in Eastern Europe. The fall of the Berlin Wall in 1989 symbolized the end of the division between East and West, and the reunification of Germany in 1990 marked the end of the Cold War. The Cold War had a profound impact on the world, shaping international relations and shaping the political and economic systems of many countries. It also led to the development of new technologies, such as the computer and the Internet, and led to significant changes in cultural and intellectual life. The Cold War was a long and complex geopolitical conflict between the United States and the Soviet Union, marked by political, economic, and military pressure, propaganda, and proxy wars. Its origins can be traced back to the aftermath of World War II, and it ended with the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991. The impact of the Cold War on the world was profound, shaping international relations and shaping the political and economic systems of many countries.